Hello, and thanks for joining us on another episode of Let's Talk. Now, in this episode, we're joined by Richard Tatum. Richard is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel with over 30 years of experience in both active duty as well as in the reserves as a leader, an educator, a facilitator, and even an entertainer with his very own radio show. And if that wasn't enough, he's also a candidate for Manatee County School Board District 5. I am sure we will have a lot to cover in this episode. I hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk. Now today, as I mentioned, I'm here with Richard Tatum. Richard, hey, thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here.
Thank you very much for your service.
You're welcome.
I really appreciate it. Richard is a 30-year veteran. He was with the U.S. Air Force as a colonel.
That's correct.
Is that correct? Yes.
That's correct.
Awesome. So tell me about that. That sounds pretty impressive.
Well, it sounds impressive. Some people might think it is. A lot of people, I like to say that the officers, especially in the Air Force, it's the sergeants, it's the chiefs, it's the airmen that are out there fixing the plane. Maybe we go out and like to fly it, but if it's not for that sergeant turning that wrench, it's the guy who loads the bombs and all that kind of stuff. The mission doesn't get done. But yes, I was fortunate enough to make it up to the rank of a colonel in the Air Force. Typically when you get to that point, it's more about leadership and management than it is about actually out in the operational Air Force doing the mission. Although a couple interesting things that I did along the way, I was fortunate enough I graduated from the Air Force Academy. I did okay there, pretty well I guess. I got a graduate scholarship. I went to Paris, France. I went to the Political Science Institute in France for a year, graduated with a certificate of political studies, and then stayed in Paris for another year and got a master's degree in French. Came back, went to pilot training with the Air Force. Was fortunate enough after that to go fly tankers. And a joke I like to use one time with people is they'd say, what did you do in the Air Force? And I say, oh, I passed gas, right? Because it was air refueling, right? So it works one time. And then I did some other things. I taught at the Air Force Academy for a number of years, French and English. I was an assistant professor there. One interesting job I had was I flew drones, which, remember, that's like where the cockpit's here and the plane's over there. It's a really challenging job because you're still dropping weapons. You're still responsible for all the things that you would be responsible for in a plane, but you're over here in the States somewhere and you're flying this thing via satellite, dropping weapons. That was interesting. And then I worked at a few large headquarters, which gives me some understanding of how bureaucracies work and budgeting and planning. So that's helpful, I think, since I'm running for school board. And then finally, the last thing I did was I did leadership education and training. And that was really a good, I think, preparation for what came after the Air Force, because I've been doing leadership education, facilitation, executive coaching. And so that's just given me an interesting perspective on senior leadership in organizations, which I was as a colonel, one of those senior leaders, and then I've kind of seen it out in the civilian world and other areas of the government. So that's how I got here. And then I retired in 2018, and I'm not a native of Florida, but I got here as quick as I could.
That's great. That's great. Well, that is impressive. And you mentioned after your career in the Army, you mentioned professional facilitator and coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about that.
So that's interesting because, it's kind of there's actually a quote from the movie The Dead Poets Society. Most people maybe have seen that. If you remember, it was at Robin Williams. He was a tutor for boys at an all-boys school, kind of a high school, and he was a literature teacher. And one of the first days of class, he walks in, he goes, "Gather around, boys." I'm going to look at the camera for this one. He says, "Gather around, boys." He says, look, medicine, law, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But art, poetry, music, romance, these are the things that make life worth living. Carpe diem, seize the day. And he says, if you're going to write the story of your life, the poem of the world, so to speak, what's going to be your verse that you add to the world, the poem of the world? And these soft studies, a lot of times, we kind of poo-paw them as well. It's not science, it's not fact-based, but these are the things that make life worth living. How are we going to interact with each other as human beings? How am I, as a leader, going to connect not just with the head of somebody, but with the heart of somebody, so that I'm leading them not just as a transactional leadership where they go, well, I got to do what I got to do because the boss said to do it, and I get a paycheck, I get a raise, I get a promotion, and I move on. It's like, I want to serve this leader. And the leader's like, I want to serve these people. And that's a heart connection. That's a soul connection. And so this leadership facilitation and education, we like to call it the art of leading oneself. Like, I got to figure out how to get the head and the heart hooked up and make those and make it work pretty well with me. And then maybe, just maybe, if I kind of figure that out, then I could step out of that, my little box and go, okay, maybe I could help that person. Maybe I could lead these people. But until we get this right, the head and the heart connected and understand the mind and the heart and how the two of them work together, it's very difficult to be a leader. You either end up being an ineffective leader because you're too mushy, you're too much about the heart, you have too much empathy, you don't hold people accountable when it's necessary, although we like to say make accountable people, or it's all about the head and people, they just work for you because, well, you're the boss and I do what he says because I want my paycheck. I want to get a promotion. So.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's a great tool to have. They teach you a lot of things in school, but leadership isn't always one of them.
No.
And so to have somebody like yourself be able to pull on your experience in the past through the Air Force and then apply a lot of those as well as some other techniques to help better someone and the organization, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but if the organization and the people are better, then their output's going to be better.
Sure. I mean, think of it like a sports team. If you make everybody better individual players, and then you teach them how to play better together, and then but first the coach has to be like, okay, I need to be the best version of the coach I can be. So I'm the best version I think I can. Well, I'm always getting better, but I'm a good version, right? I've improved myself as the coach. And then now I can go out and help each individual player be better, and now I can help them work better as a team. You're going to win more games. As a matter of fact, at least up until a couple of years ago, I haven't looked at it recently, but the San Antonio Spurs basketball team had the highest winning percentage of any basketball team out there. Not necessarily the most championships, but wins versus losses. And if you watch them play and their coach there, they have that idea, right? We work together here as a team. There are no individual stars. We have made better versions of ourselves to be really good players, but now we're winning more games because we have a good coach and we work together as a team.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a little bit different, but we've talked a lot about various educational things, and you made a great quote here. I have to also mention, I was on Amazon the other day, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did I see you have a book?
I do, yeah. I just happen to have a copy right here. How about that? Right down here, yeah.
Amazon delivers just like that.
That's right. So I guess I'll hold it up. That's what we do on these kind of shows, right? Book, But I'll hold it over here. So when I'd been in the Air Force maybe, 20 years or so, and you get promoted, and every time you get promoted, when you enter the Air Force, you raise your right hand and you say, I would like to support and defend, I swear to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I thought, well, what am I exactly defending? Am I really defending the Constitution, like that piece of paper? Should I go to the National Archives with a rifle and stand there and go, hey, you're not going to steal the Constitution while I'm here. I'm protecting it. Am I supporting it like, oh, geez, it's heavy.
Right?
What does it mean? It's like, no, I support what it stands for. What does it stand for? Freedom, democracy, liberty. What does that mean? I don't know. Those are all vague terms, So then I thought, well, who came up with these original ideas of what that means in America? Freedom, democracy, liberty. Well, the founding fathers did. I wish I could talk to them. They're dead. No YouTube back then, not even any 8-track tapes back then,
Oh.
But then it dawned on me, I was like, well, they wrote all kinds of stuff. There are literally hundreds of thousands of documents, letters that they wrote to each other, speeches that they gave that somebody recorded, things that they said in congressional records, proclamation speeches, inaugural speeches, farewell speeches for those who were presidents and stuff like that. And so I said, well, I could go back and talk to him. And so the name of the book is actually Interviews with the Founders, the way America is now and the way it was supposed to be. And I asked them questions like, what are the enumerated powers of the federal government? How big should the federal government be? What's the primary role of the federal government? How about education? What were your thoughts on that? And with hundreds of thousands of documents to draw from, you can figure out what they said. And so Washington, Madison, Jefferson, Franklin, and Hamilton, and there's actually one more, I know there's 6 of them in there. But anyway, I just sat down and had an interview with them. I'm the moderator. And then I do these interviews, and at the end there's like 4 or 5 pages of me making comments on what they said, and we go to the next chapter. And then the back of the book is, I think, the inaugural address from Jefferson and the farewell address from Washington in 1797, I think. And so it's just it's a fun read. It's not like a typical boring history book. It's like I didn't want it to be like that. I just thought I want to interview these guys, just like you're doing with me now, except I had to write what they said instead of recording it with modern technology.
Well, that is really fascinating. I can't wait to get a copy. I'm definitely going to get that now that I know more about the book. So
Okay.
yeah, I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Sure.
Between you being an author and between your time in the Air Force as well as your professional facilitating career and coaching and everything else, it really has seemed to set you up for something that you mentioned just a little bit ago. You said that you're running for school board. That's District 5, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
That's fantastic. Well, best of luck for that race with you. Tell us more about that race, how you got in it, and some of your plans. And
Sure. So school board District 5, just to kind of give the boundaries of that school district. By the way, the election will only be within districts this time. So it's not a countywide election.
Meaning
People in District 4 will vote for their school board member. People in District 5 will vote for their school board member. Last time around, it was countywide. So even though you were running for school board District 5, everybody in the county could vote. This time, I don't make the rules, right? I just follow them. You only vote within the district. Just so people kind of...
So you live in District 5?
I live in District 5, right, kind of in the center of Lakewood Ranch. The election is on August 23rd, by the way. It's in conjunction with our primary. So, if you feel like after watching this you want to vote for me, don't think, yep, I'll be there in November, because it'll be over by then. So August 23rd is when you want to go. So, based on the background that I have I'm actually pursuing a PhD in the humanities with kind of a history track. I taught at the Air Force Academy. I was an assistant professor there. I'm actually a substitute teacher at a local high school. And all that together combined to say, well, if I want to stay in the fight, so to speak, I raise my hand to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And I really can't do that with a plane and a bomb or a gun or something anymore because I'm retired from the military. But how else could I keep up that fight? And unfortunately, to some degree, it's too bad that we're here. But we are in somewhat of a kind of a cultural war, for the founding. On the back of my shirt, you can see I'm just about being an American. And what that means, by the way, is I just want to be an American. I don't want to put anything in front of that and then a hyphen and then an American. We can all be proud of our kind of racial and ethnic roots, but the top team needs to be the American team, so I'm just an American, right? On the back of my shirt, I talk about the ABCs of being just an American, which I have a radio show called the Just an American Radio Hour. But here they are. A and B, America's beautiful. C, capitalist free market economy provides the greatest amount of prosperity to the greatest amount of people. Democratic constitutional representative republic, which means that we don't have a straight democracy where 50% of the vote and you win. We have representatives that we elect, and they generally go and make our decisions for us. We have some democracy in local taxes, but generally it's representative democracy with a constitution. That's the highest law, not a king or a queen. English is a primary language. I'm French. My wife speaks French. She is French. I'm French. So this idea that I think we should only have one language, but to get to know each other and build relationships, we have to be able to talk to each other. It would be impossible for you and I to have this interview right now if we didn't share a common language. F, the right to bear firearms. GH and I, Greco-Roman intellectual heritage. I won't go into that, but that is our philosophical and political heritage. And then finally, Judeo-Christian values. Notice I didn't say religion because the Constitution obviously gives us the ability or the right to practice a religion or not practice any at all, but that value system, which James Madison actually said is the Ten Commandments and the Sermon on the Mount. That's my religion. It's the Judeo, the Ten Commandments, Old Testament, the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew chapter 5, book 5, chapter 5 through 7, Sermon on the Mount. Those values together are our Judeo-Christian values. So all of that put together, I looked out there and I said, how can I keep serving? Well, I could maybe be in politics. One of my favorite Bible verses that someone told me one time, another great leader that I know from the Air Force, he said, Rich, to whom much has been given, much is expected. In some ways, I'd just be, snook season's coming up here pretty soon. And let's see, I could run for the school board and deal with all that goes along with it. I could just, snook season's coming up. To whom much is given, much is expected. I can't just go out. Well, I feel that the fundamental values of our country are under attack. And so I need to stay in the fight. Maybe someday down the road I can go look for snook again. But right now, it's like the guys who went out to World War II. I remember my dad, right? He was working through the professional baseball ranks to try to get to be a professional baseball player. He's 17. He's born in 1924. The war kicks off December 7th, 1941. He's like, I think, single A, double A, is working his way up. And he goes off to war for 4 years. Comes back, and he just didn't have it anymore, right? I think he plateaued out at AAA, never made it that next step to the majors. You talked to him about it, and I said, did that bother you? Were you disappointed? He was like, yeah, sure, but I wasn't going to shirk my duty. What, was I going to stay and play baseball while all the other guys like me, healthy, young guys, went off and died for our country? And so that's kind of, in a way, I'm like, there's another time and another place to look for snook. Right now, I got to stay in the fight in whatever capacity that I can to support and defend the Constitution, because it is under attack.
Well, that's fantastic, and I am glad you're there doing that. And I did fail to mention your radio show, but I think that that's also another way that you stay in the fight, because I believe that radio show, it airs weekly. It's on Wednesday nights.
That's right.
And what are the sort of the things that you cover on that?
So I like to bring in people that I call great Americans that believe on the things on the back of my shirt, and they're the people that I bring in come from all walks of life and all backgrounds and both genders, and they, for instance, one of my favorite guests was a lady from Blexit. She runs Blexit in Florida. People don't know what Blexit is. It's black people exiting the left, right? Great Americans with black skin, as I like to say. And so that was one of my favorite interviews, because she's a great American. Being a great American has nothing to do with race or gender. It has to do with buying into the core values that I just talked about, right? Just like in the Air Force, we had core values: integrity first, service before self, excellence in all we do. It didn't have anything to do with race or gender. There's core values that you buy into. So I have authors that have written history books. I had one lady, she's one of my they all are made into a podcast eventually, so if you want to go out and find the Just an American podcast on Podomatic, you can. But one of my favorite episodes was a lady who was a great patriot. She's a mom, she's a Christian, she's a patriot, loves her God, loves her family, loves her country. But in a previous life, she was a Colombian drug dealer and went to prison, federal prison, for 5 years, and came out on the other side of that and completely reformed her life. And like I said, loves her God, loves her family, loves her country. Got married, had a daughter. I think her daughter went to the Naval Academy, if I remember correctly, is going to be a doctor, I think, in the Navy now. Just a beautiful story of someone who, buys into the core values, and you take those core values. You can succeed in America if you believe in those core values, no matter what your race is, no matter what your gender is. You can succeed in America if you'll just buy in to the program, the American. If you'll get on the American team and follow the core values. It was like that in the Air Force. Anybody could succeed in the Air Force. Get on the team, follow the core values. You'll succeed. Not everybody can be a general, but you will succeed where you will have a fulfilled and prosperous career or prosperous life.
I love it. That's perfect. That's perfect. But I don't want to get too far from your school board as well. There has to be some differences between you and the person that you may run up against.
Mm-hmm.
How do we know how to choose? Tell us what makes you different and why we should vote for Richard.
Sure. I won't name my opponent, just to be more polite. I don't want to be personal about things, It's my opponent, District 5. It'll be the guy on the ballot whose name is not Richard Tatum, right?
Fair enough.
So we just have I'm sure we both have good intentions. I'm sure that we both want the best for the school system. If I win, when I win, I will thank him for his service and shake his hand. And he's been a long-time public servant in the community in different facets, sometimes elected office, doing other things. But we have just a fundamental difference of view about, you might call it a worldview. He very much believes in more of a social justice kind of worldview, where we still have to be very focused on race and integrating that idea of racial equality into our school system, and diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I was at a meeting today where they were talking about this whole big, long program that they've been doing for a year and a half to kind of march that into our school system. And he believes that it's good, that this is what our children need.
But wait, I thought CRT
Yeah.
Is that the right thing? I thought that was taken out of the school system. You're telling me that there's something in there that looks and sounds just like CRT, but they're not calling it, and so that's okay.
Let's define that real quick.
Please.
Review here. So I'm going to talk to the camera this time. So here's what you need to know about critical race theory. It's neo-Marxism, and I'll get to the reason why it's neo-Marxism. Neo meaning it's kind of like Marxism. So original Marxism is started by a guy named Karl Marx, who is a German philosopher back in the mid-19th century. He comes up with the idea of communism along with a guy named Friedrich Engels, and Marx and writes the Communist Manifesto. So the idea of communism basically is that there are oppressors and there are oppressed people. That's kind of the communistic idea. It's a power struggle. For Marx, it was about economic power struggle, right? You had people, the capitalists, who had capital exploiting the workers. His idea, workers of the world unite, rise up, overthrow, the greedy capitalists. Well, as life went on, especially in the West, where we have these Judeo-Christian values, we believe we're Imago Dei, made in the image of God. We have these God-given rights that the government, in theory, is not supposed to violate. In the West, we prospered. Our standard of living got better. We had more rights, more freedom. We got rid of slavery. Black people got the right to vote. Black people got their civil rights. Women got the right to vote. Life was looking pretty good in the West. When I say the West, we're talking about Western Europe, Canada, Australia, people who followed kind of the Judeo-Christian value system along with capitalism, free market economy, constitutions, those type of things. Where communism was tried in the Soviet Union, in Maoist China, in Cambodia, it just didn't work. Cuba. And so the Marxists were like, this isn't working out so well, so what are we going to do here? Well, we're still going to use this oppressor-oppressed model, but we're going to now use race and gender as opposed to the economic oppression, because that's not working out. People are actually doing pretty well in these capitalist free market economies where they're based on, create God-given rights. So that's what they switched this to now. And so critical theory is the idea that the basic psychological dynamic between people it's always a power struggle. It's some type of power struggle. It's economic, it's race, it's gender, it's something. Critical race theory then is, well, no, the primary power struggle is between races. And so it's a power struggle between white people, who are the colonizers and went around the world and subjugated everybody. I'm kind of summarizing, but it is the big picture. Subjugated everybody, and so they're the colonizers. Especially the white males are the oppressors. Everybody else is oppressed. And through diversity, equity, and inclusion, which basically means we're going to teach that some people are privileged, basically white people, especially white males, and everybody else is marginalized. And we are going to, through efforts to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion, raise up the marginalized masses. And that is CRT, right? That the white people, especially the white males, are the oppressors. Everybody else is marginalized. And so the goal of society, through education, through all of our institutions, is to raise up the marginalized people, let the privileged people know that they're privileged, let the other ones know that they've been marginalized, and then work the system, so to speak, to fix this supposed imbalance in power between the races. And let's be honest and give the devil his due, that there was a time in America where that was true. But I'm going to quote Shelby Steele real quick. Shelby Steele is a black author. He's about 72 or 73 years old. He grew up in a segregated school system in Chicago, where his parents actually fought to get him a better school. But he's been writing. He has a PhD in English, used to teach English. He's been writing on the issue of social issues for 40 years. And he said in 2015, I can show you the video, he said, America has made the most incredible fundamental moral transformation in the history of the world. There is no reason anymore in the United States of America why people with black skin color cannot succeed. Morgan Freeman said in 2005 to Mike Wallace, I don't want black history anymore. The way to solve racism is to stop talking about it. In 2013, he told Don Lemon on CNN, Don Lemon said, is race a barrier to economic success for black people in America? And Morgan Freeman looked at him and said, no, look at me, look at you. And he's right, like a young gay black man, because Don Lemon is black, right? And I have no issues with that, by the way. I mean, great for him, good for him. Let him live his lifestyle. But here's an older black guy who's a multimillionaire, world famous actor. Here's a young gay black guy who's risen to the top of his profession as a reporter for CNN. It's just not a barrier anymore, and we need to stop talking about it. We just, as Morgan Freeman said, it's like talking about a divorce 20 years after it. Just, it's over, it's done with. It was a shame. Too bad it happened, but there's no reason that all people in America can't. There are federal judges that are black women. There are federal judges that are Hispanic women. I mean, you could go down the list.
So the long and the short is, you're against it.
Yes, I'm against it, and it's coming to a school near us. There's a whole plan. I mean, I sat there today in a school board workshop. There's a whole plan called the Florida Department of Education African American History Task Force, and it's not just about, and talking about Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass, two great black Americans, by the way, who love their God, love their family, love their country. It's diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm sure eventually there'll be some unconscious bias training in there, which is really bad. Basically, it says you're a racist, you don't know it, and you can never fix it because it's unconscious, because you can't fix it. There's stuff in there about what's called a decolonizing curriculum. What that basically means is, I had to look that up. I'm like, what's a decolonizing curriculum? It's basically saying that, the white colonial people who came with their Enlightenment thinking and their logic and their Aristotelian ways of reasoning and syllogisms, that's all just white colonialism. We need to look at other ways of thinking and acting, and I'm like, well, we could do that, but let's see, which countries in the world have succeeded scientifically and become very prosperous, and which ones haven't. That doesn't mean that those individual human beings are any less smart or intelligent, but the system that we've put together in the West has led to the freest, prosperous countries that have ever existed on the face of the earth. And what this does, CRT, diversity, equity, inclusion, decolonizing curriculum, it's right in the plan, go look at it on the Manatee County website, is say, no, that system is just made up by the white colonizers. We think we'd like to change it and manipulate it and rise up other ways of thinking and acting. It's much more than just, hey, Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington were great Americans, let's highlight them and make sure we know about them. It's much more pernicious than that.
Well, let me highlight this. If there is a difference between you and your opponent, you stand in the way of CRT and or whatever else it may be called, and your opponent doesn't. So if there is a single issue, because let's face it, if you're running for school board, I think that you do have a lot in common, probably more than you have in different. But if there is a difference, and it's a big difference, you stand in the way of this. And so I think that's kind of the short answer of that as well.
And there's also some other issues where when you listen to him speak, he just has a different mindset about economics and competitive free markets. And I don't want to go into it too deep, but yeah, you're right. That's the primary thing. And we both want the best for the kids. I'm sure we want to improve reading for the children. We might have a different way of going about that. But when you have that mindset, you're going to bring that CRT DE mindset, and that's a big issue for him. He's the big proponent of it, and he's doing positive damage to the children in our school system, all the while, just because you have good intentions. The old saying, the road to where. A lot of people have good intentions, but the results are not good in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for going into that. I'm afraid we're running upon our hard stop time here, out of respect for your time and your time as well. But I wanted to make sure we go into those differences. I wanted to make sure people got to know who you are and how you got to this point and why you might be their best candidate and for Manatee County District 5 for the school board. So thank you very much for your time today.
Great, I appreciate it. It was good working with you.
Likewise.
Just to say, aim high, Manatee. We'll see you out in the county. Remember, the most important question really is to ask, how can I be helpful? And if you'll do that and look around, you'll find all kinds of opportunities, from picking up plastic to just things that won't dawn on us. But ask that question as you're looking around, dealing with other people, how to be helpful. Thanks for being great Americans. Remember, Richard Tatum, candidate, School Board District 5, nonpartisan, on August the 23rd, 2022. Take care. Aim high.
Fantastic, thank you. And we'll make sure to include links to his book and his radio show and everything else. Everybody have a great day. Thank you.